Welcome to Deep Dive Dialogue. Our topic of discussion today is comprehensive genomic profiling. Comprehensive genomic profiling (CGP) is an advanced diagnostic approach that analyzes a broad range of genomic alterations, including mutations, gene fusions, and copy number variations. CGP aids in personalized medicine, guiding targeted therapies and improving outcomes for patients, particularly in oncology, by identifying actionable genetic mutations. To discuss this important topic, we are joined today by Ms. Debjani Saha. Debjani is AGM Marketing at Premus Life Sciences Private Limited. She has done PhD in molecular genetics from Indian Institute of Science. Welcome to this session.
Thank you, Manisha, and thank you, Voice of Healthcare and XEdge for having me. And happy to be here and happy to address any questions.
Right. Happy to have you. So, to begin with, what is comprehensive genomic profiling and what type of genetic information does it provide to clinicians and patients?
So, comprehensive genomic profiling, or it's even abbreviated as CGP, is an advanced diagnostic technique which is basically analyzed to analyze a completely wide range of alterations in a single test. It could be the entire genome, it could be large portions of it, which basically is analyzed to identify either single point mutations or genomic rearrangements, or it could be amplifications or any other genetic changes which are relevant to diseases, especially cancers. Now, a lot of panels are also including gene expression as a component of comprehensive genomic profiling, because especially for genetic rearrangements or gene rearrangements, we feel that if it's expressed, this would basically give idea about the functional component of the otherwise stable gene, right? And a CGP basically provides the clinicians and patients with detailed information on, let's say, mutations in cancer-related genes or genomic rearrangements, like I said before, like gene fusions, or it could be copy number alterations, it could be amplifications, it could be insertion, deletion of DNA fragments. Tumor mutational burden and microsatellite instability are also components which basically give us, idea about the likelihood of response in case of immunotherapy, right? So all of this information helps the clinicians to take very, very informed, personalized treatment decisions. And this includes, targeted therapies. It includes things like immunotherapies. It also gives them options for clinical trials, etc. So this is basically the long and short of comprehensive genomic profiling.
Correct. So, how can CGP contribute to early detection and prevention of cancer, and what are the current limitations in using it as a screening tool?
So, see, ideally, because CGP is nothing but analysis of the genome, or let's say parts of it, it can give you a wide range of information about hereditary cancer risk, like, for instance, especially for genes which are very, very commonly implicated in hereditary cancer syndromes like breast cancer or ovarian cancers, or let's say, it could identify changes in precancerous cells much before they become malignant, or it could basically guide prevention strategies, like, for instance, if somebody wants to undergo prophylaxis prophylactic surgeries or chemopreventive drugs, or let's say if somebody wants to avoid exposure to known carcinogens, it can dictate all of this. But the thing is, it's a very advanced tool,
Right.
and it's also not very inexpensive, right? So that's the reason why people don't use it, let's say, as a screening tool. There are many more simplistic screening tools available, right? Because there are limitations, associated with comprehensive genomic profiling. Like, for instance, it's associated with a high cost. Currently, it's still not very cost effective as per most standards. For certain cancers, there is a lack of clinical utility. It is known to be useful in diagnosing and treating advanced cancers, but its role in detecting certain early stage cancers or in asymptomatic individuals especially is still limited, right? And many, like for instance, many genetic alterations may not lead to cancer, right? And or if it does have some kind of a physiology, that might progress very slowly. So then there is uncertainty in patient management, right? Or it might just give, in certain cases, like false positives or variants of unknown significance, in which case, again, the clinician is at a crossroad on deciding the treatment outcomes or patient management outcomes. So while it might show promise in cancer prevention, it's probably not as yet the best tool available. What it's being used for in certain cases is to basically monitor a relapse of certain cancers. So once the primary treatment has been given, or the first line of treatment has been given, you would want to monitor for the resistance to the treatment regime, right? So in those cases, CGP is being utilized, but that also it's the liquid CGP and not the comprehensive genomic profiling associated with solid tumors.
Right, right.
Because non-invasive or liquid CGPs um, are you know, much more accepted in those kind of outcomes.
So, how can CGP be effectively integrated into routine clinical practice, and what are the key challenges in its implementation, particularly in resource limited settings?
So, look, first of all, I think there is a huge amount of, let's say, a gap in understanding um, guidelines vis-a-vis CGP. Right now, we're not very familiar with the guidelines. So establishing clear guidelines on the use of CGP, let's say for advanced cancers or MRD, etc., is required, right? You need additionally guidelines on interpreting results, actionable mutations, treatment decisions to ensure effective and consistent clinical use of CGP in whatever cases they might be applicable. Second of all, I think clinician education or the healthcare provider education, and that not just includes the clinicians, it also includes pathologists, it includes genetic counselors and geneticists, it includes even lab personnel on the use of CGP, interpreting results, basically coming to a clinical decision vis-a-vis treatment outcomes, etc. So that can be done through CMEs, workshops, or molecular tumor boards. Then you have to also encourage a collaboration between all of these various stakeholders which are there in the healthcare settings to ensure not just an agreement of using CGP for cases that apply, but also the execution of CGP till the time the patient gets the treatment regime, right? Apart from which, you need to have certain AI-driven tools or electronic health records to make sure that the clinicians are able to interpret the amount of data, because the amount of data that is generated out of a CGP exercise is huge. Right. So to be able to effectively interpret that data requires a huge amount of, let's say, AI-driven tools or machine learning tools or deep learning tools. So all of that has to be in place, right? And also to make sure that it's delivered, like CGP, like I said, is costly. It's an expensive affair. So insurance companies, for instance, need to have certain plans which will be based on the efficacy of CGP as a standard of care for oncology. And all of this needs to basically be influencing the insurance providers to put it under the insurance blanket, because as of now it's paid from pocket, right? And the government policies should also support inclusion of CGP as a standard of care.
Right.
Even that is not there in place. Again, because there are no clear guidelines, we don't have enough um, evidence based research, at least in the Indian context and stuff. There is, but not enough, right? And also, most important is access to drugs or access to therapies,
Mm.
because you might have all the data
Mm.
which probably show a certain link of genetic alterations or genetic mutations or gene rearrangements to certain outcomes. However, if the patient does not have access to drugs or medicines, all of that is going to be in vain. So you need to have access, the patients need to have access to the either the drugs or clinical trials, etc. Now the limitations in the current context, especially in Indian context, is, like I said, the per capita income in India is about $2,000, $2,500. So in that case, a comprehensive genomic profiling, which costs several thousands of dollars, may not be really well accepted,
Right.
because unless you have insurance plans covering it, unless you have government willing to invest in certain programs which make these tests more accessible, it may be really difficult to kind of implement it. B, the standards of doing this test. So a patient has to be basically able to afford it, but you also need providers to provide quality CGP tests, and so the infrastructure and the skill set required to execute these tests are also not present universally. Like, they're not ubiquitous, they are also very few and far in between.
Mm.
And so skill, the ability to interpret results. So skill is both in terms of the wet lab
Yeah.
and the ability to interpret results. And both of that is in really short supply. So once all of that is in place, aside of government guidelines, government regulations, and of course, the affordability, access, and all, when all of these come together, we can expect the tests to be democratized or readily available.
Very well said. So, guidelines, accessibility, affordability, and the skill set. So, these are the keys, right? So,
Absolutely.
how can advancements in AI and machine learning enhance the analysis of CGP data to improve diagnostic accuracy and therapeutic decision making?
So, see, the thing is that you need to have, like I said, CGP automatically comes with a huge data kernel or huge data deluge, right? So, the ability to handle that kind of a huge data deluge should be there. And nothing does this better than, deep learning or machine learning programs or AI algorithms, because uh, manually, such data would take many, many days to curate. And all of us know that oncology care or clinical care cannot wait for that much time, right? So AI and ML algorithms can basically process and analyze this data at speeds which are far beyond human capabilities, basically. So identifying clinically relevant patterns, or to be able to derive correlations. And all of this can be easily missed by manual interventions. But using AI and ML algorithms, it's easy to do it. Certainly, variant classifications, like for instance, genetic variations, which have, let's say, maybe variants of unknown significance, for instance. These variants may be difficult for human beings to place, but suppose if you have large data sets
Hmm.
in which certain variations are associated with certain symptoms or certain pathophysiology, then it's easy to probably classify those variations into categories of benign, malignant, pathogenic, etc. Also, pattern recognitions, for instance, for with deep learning models, which excel at bringing out certain patterns, subtle patterns in genomic data, which might correlate with specific disease subtypes, right? This is something which AI or ML algorithms can do very well. And also integration with clinical data. Let's say the patient has certain history, they have pathology reports, they have biochemistry, they have radiology, etc. um, all of this can be integrated using these algorithms to provide a more holistic picture on the patient's condition. This multi-dimensional analysis can basically help generate more precise diagnosis and tailor treatment strategies. Not just that, like if even if you want to match, let's say the mutations with tailored therapies or targeted therapies, AI-driven platforms can rapidly cross-reference the patient's genomic profile with massive databases of existing targeted therapies, clinical trial data, drug efficacy, etc. And they can basically allow personal treatment regimes or recommendations by identifying which therapies are likely to benefit with specific genetic alterations, right, found in the tumor. Um, Even if you have to, let's say, use certain off-label drugs, like you want to repurpose certain drugs for mutations which are traditionally not known to be impacted by those drugs. In cases where legacy drugs are not working, you can actually, use such algorithms to maybe take a decision in those cases, and not just in the, let's say, patient delivery or patient treatment regime. AI can also be used for, let's say, biomarker discovery or predictive biomarker development, etc., right? And for real time, let's say, support for clinicians. For instance, when clinicians are actually treating a patient, they would like to have clinical decisions based on the analysis of the data which is curated by CGP. And essentially, if it's available to the clinician as like a mobile app or in a very, very easily interpretable form. So every clinician wants that the moment they have a sample, it should go into the system, and you should have the interpreted results come in front of them, and they don't lose any time in basically the entire process of translation. They don't lose any time. So all of that will only be benefited or only be enhanced or accelerated by having AI and ML algorithms in place. So basically, I mean, in general, if you have a lot of data deluge from a comprehensive genomic profiling, these algorithms can basically accelerate or expedite the speeds at which the data is analyzed and curated. B, whatever signatures manual analysis can miss out, they can actually flag out those signatures and help in understanding the context of the mutation, because mutation A in patient X can mean something, in patient Y can mean something else based on the context. So these algorithms can really help the clinician take the decision faster and in a better way, in a more informed way.
Right. Fully agree that AI is outsmarting as well as helping doctors, healthcare workers for informed decision. So, how can healthcare providers and patients be educated about CGP to ensure informed decision making and maximize its clinical utility?
So first of all, I think um, there should be a continuous medical education program into place. So there are so many seminars, conferences, institutional workshops that are carried out by a lot of technology providers these days. We're also doing the same. And we really believe that because, all of these information help to get an updated view of what's happening in the field and how is technology influencing basically the current treatment regimes. This can basically help the clinician to get a very up-to-date information, right? So any kind of a continuous learning program, it could be through a workshop, it could be through seminars, it could be through conferences, it could be through peer-to-peer learning, online courses, certifications, because there are so many of these. You have to basically vet the quality of many of these certifications or online programs, but they're available, right? You have a lot of hospital-based training programs which are there in in the healthcare landscape today. Besides of which, I think to basically get it into the mainstream, it's also important not just to be aware of what are the changes which are happening in the context of technology being used to address oncology standard of care, but it's also important to communicate these to the patient. So, genetic counseling, for instance, plays a very important role because genetic counselors have to communicate, the pitfalls or the significance of certain mutations or certain genetic alterations to the patient and what it means for them, right? So, genetic counselors and clinicians have to work in tandem to make sure that this can, go into mainstream. Right? Also, I think uh, there should be practical they say no there should be practical case studies and simulations, like for instance, uh, if you offer real life cases, or if you offer simulations or problem solving scenarios involving CGP that can help clinicians to better understand how to genomic integrate genomic data into treatment plans, but more importantly, also having multidisciplinary tumor boards,
Mm,
which are happening in select hospitals, but they need to happen many, like much more pervasively,
mm,
because participation in tumor boards that review CGP data for cancer cases or can enhance knowledge through peer learning is one very very effective way, and we've been a part of certain tumor boards, and we see that the learning is very very impactful because somebody is demonstrating the real life use of, let's say, a comprehensive genomic profiling for a patient,
mm.
and the others get to learn from it.
Right.
Uh, that is from the context of the clinician. But even for patients, there should be easy to understand collaterals,
Mm,
which may be taken out by either the healthcare providers or technology providers, which can help them to understand what a comprehensive genomic profiling test would mean for them, right? And it could either be done by collaterals, which are like hard copy, or through animated videos, etc. And then you have a pre and a post test counseling by genetic counselors to communicate the risk to for the genetic counselors should basically take that platform to explain test results in a way that the patient can understand, and they can understand what is in for them if
mm,
they do that test. And once the test is done, what are the outcomes, how are the genetic alterations going to be significant in their specific cases, what do the VOSs mean, the variance of unknown significance means, what are the complex findings,
mm,
what does it mean for the patient, etc. And have basically avenues to have financial support. That is very very important because unless it's made cost effective, unless it's made accessible to the patients, so you can actually have patient advocacy organizations which collectively um, make a pitch to certain non-government organizations or even government organizations to make funds available for such kind of you know diagnostic routes, right? And also probably work on certain, let's say, um, collaborations with pharma companies, because a lot of times pharma companies, if they're able to issue things like coupons
mm,
for certain drugs of theirs, where the CGP is a companion diagnostic,
mm,
that would make the drug, would make the diagnostic test affordable for the patient in question. So maybe collaborations with pharma companies, where pharma companies issue some sort of subsidy
mm,
in the diagnostic test associated with the drug, the companion diagnostic.
mm,
So these are some of the ways that you can actually make the test democratized. One more very interesting thing is where indigenous companies
mm,
can, bring out some solutions which are based on, let's say, Indian genomic data
mm,
and they're low cost, so
mm,
that because the current players in the market are mostly from outside of India,
mm.
so they come with a cost. So if suppose a lot of companies in India are able to generate solutions which are more tailored to the Indian genomic content, and also they are indigenized, so the cost implications are lower.
Mm.
I think this would really help in you know making the tests more accessible to the public at large, or making the tests more democratized.
Right. So, with this, I conclude the session, and I truly believe that comprehensive genomic profiling is a transformative step and it is a critical tool for modern healthcare. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Manisha. And yeah, I mean, pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Bye bye.